Steel City. Is everybody ready to go? It's proclaimed the greatest radio show.
Welcome, fans, to our Week 17 waiver claims episode. I'm your host, Jim Sella, in studio with Jay Dash. I'd usually be a little more enthusiastic, but the Steelers have lost. I lost most of my bets. I lost the fantasy championship. I lost on Bet Black. I lost like $450 this weekend, man.
Terrible.
Brutal.
Bet Black. Tell people about Bet Black real quick.
Bet Black. There is an app for your iPhone. They're getting on Android soon. It's all one word, Bet Black. You just go to the iStore, look it up. You can pick different props. You start at $1. You never put any of your own money into it. But once you get up to $100, you can get paid out. You can only bet as much as you have. But say you have $50, you can make 2 or 3 different bets, for $10. But you can only bet like once a day. Like once you make a bet and win, you're not going to get your winnings again until the end of the day. So unless you make multiple bets before they all go off, you can't make a multiple bet during the day. It's a very fun app. Like I said, you never put any of your own money in, so I take a lot of risks, and I usually just try to double my money up each time. Bunch of different props, money lines. You can bet on over-unders. You can bet on the spread.
And you get up to $100 and you get that money, right?
You get money. Soon they'll actually have a way to be on PayPal, and you'll be able to get the money transferred directly to your PayPal account. Right now, you will get a check mailed to your house.
Either way, money's money.
Please believe.
All right, let's get this started, though. Waiver claims. Quarterbacks, let's go with Ryan Fitzpatrick first.
All right, first of all, this is blasphemy. Why would you put that guy number 1 on the list? We need him to break his freaking arm and his beard burn his face off so that he doesn't play on Sunday.
You're talking as a Steeler fan, I'm guessing?
Please believe.
Yeah, but we start with quarterbacks, so that's why he's at the top of the list. We only have 2 quarterbacks here, and Ryan Fitzpatrick has been killing it. And look, man, everything he's done this season, he's still available in just 50% of the leagues.
He's never made the playoffs, though. Did you know that?
Yes, I did know that. I actually mentioned it yesterday. But look, over the last 5 games, 13 touchdowns, just 1 pick, and he has at least 263 yards passing in each of those games, at least 34 pass attempts in each of his last 8 games, and we know they're going up against Buffalo this week in Buffalo. They're about middle of the league against fantasy quarterbacks this season. And the last time they did play, he did play poorly, but he also wasn't completely healthy. Remember, he was injured for a while, and that's when he was injured.
Thumb injury.
He had 193 yards passing.
He got it stuck up his butt, and he fell down.
2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. And I don't think he's a terrible play this week. I think he's going to actually have a better game than that.
They're going up against Buffalo, right?
Going against Buffalo.
All year long, people have said Buffalo's defense is good. Buffalo's defense is good. And I'm not saying they're complete garbage, but if you look at the numbers, they have regressed in basically all major categories from last season under Rex Ryan. So, Fitzpatrick definitely has a chance to put up good numbers. He hasn't been a fantasy beast all year. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not even talking about the injury. I'm just even saying when he's healthy. He's been, I would say, like the top of that second tier, but when he was healthy, he's been one of the most consistent players, period, in the NFL this year. I mean, he's really just played well in basically every game that he was healthy for. Maybe give or take a little bit, but everybody struggles at a moment. So I wouldn't be shocked if Fitzpatrick put up big numbers this week, and that's a bad news bears for Steeler fans.
How about Brian Hoyer? Available in about 85% of the leagues. He's in the last stage of concussion protocol right now. He got injured in week 14, missed the following 2 games, but he did play Jacksonville earlier this year, and that's who he plays this week, and he played very well against them. They led up the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. Brian Hoyer, I've been saying his name a lot this season. He had a pretty good season when he was healthy. He should come back for this game, I would have to believe, because, well, they don't necessarily need a win. The Colts have to have a lot happen for them to overtake Houston, correct?
Yeah, they had one thing happen. Denver won last night. That was one of the things that had to happen. So they need 9 things to happen now for the Colts to make the playoffs.
Well, there you go. But I think Brian Hoyer, if he comes back, he's going to have a good game versus Jacksonville. We've seen Jacksonville get torched this past week versus Drew Brees, and Brian Hoyer did some Drew Brees type things when he was healthy. So I would stick him in my lineup if I needed a quarterback. And like I said, he's still available in most leagues. Has been all season long, and when healthy, has been one of the top 10 quarterbacks, really.
You trust him coming off a concussion?
Well, I mean, you probably have a quarterback at this point, but if you're looking for a quarterback out there, and Ryan Fitzpatrick ain't out there, I mean, Brian Hoyer's a pretty nice choice. I'm not going to say I completely 100% trust him, but he's going up against a very bad pass defense. So I'd give it a go if I needed a quarterback over someone like Jameis Winston this week.
Who do you got next?
Going to move into running backs real quick. Marshawn Lynch, there's a possibility he
Todd
could come
Gurley's
back
not
for
as
this.
good as this guy. That's what I hear.
Well, possibly not. Marshawn Lynch is a beast. But he's available in about 25% of the leagues. Has a tough matchup this week going at Arizona. They let up the 7th fewest fantasy points to running backs. But
is he playing? I didn't hear.
It's not sure. It's
okay.
probably doubtful. But, I mean, if he gave it a go and you need a running back, Marshawn Lynch is a pretty good choice to have. So maybe just stash him on your bench and see what happens.
Believe it. I mean, it's the last week, so there's got to be somebody you know you're not going to play, so you might as well just cut them and pick him up.
Right.
I was going to cut Shady McCoy just because he was hurt, and it was my last week, but then that waiver claim didn't even go through, and I lost because of it. There's 3 reasons why I lost. I suck, Danny Woodhead, and Julius Thomas.
Oh, Danny Woodhead. I forgot all about that. He jacked him from you, and he did do it. All right, how about some healthy running backs here? Go with James White.
That was Easy's guy last week. He won his fantasy championship. Easy is the spread fantasy champion, by the way.
Please believe.
First ever.
White's still available in about 40% of the league, so he could still be out there for your championship here. 26 receptions, 252 yards, and 3 TDs over the last 4 games. He had double-digit fantasy points in each of those games. He had double digits in 5 of his last 6 games. And they have Miami this week. In Miami, they led up the 3rd most to fantasy running backs this season. The last time these two teams played, New England scored 36 points in that game. White wasn't a factor. He really wasn't a part of the game plan at that point in the season. But I think this time around, he could have a big game because Miami's defense, not good.
I hate New England because they always plug these weirdo running backs in and then they somehow do good. Not great, but still good. And then you pick one up and then the other one does good. So then you pick him up and then the other one does good. But James White has really been their steady pace guy now because Blunt's hurt and Dion Lewis is hurt. And
yeah, they got Brandon Bolden out there.
Yeah, you can only plug so many people
Jackson?
in. Yeah, they did sign Steven Jackson.
He got a couple carries last week.
And I'm not saying White is Barry Sanders, but as far as the Patriots go, he's the safest play of a Patriots running back that you could have seen in the last couple years, just because you never knew who was going to start.
Yeah, he sort of took over that Shane Vereen role from last season. Shane Vereen was always a decent player and put up some big games, but James White seems like a more consistent player. Back to Bilal Powell, man. Available in about 70% of the leagues. I've been saying this guy's name for weeks now.
Did it all right for me last week.
Yeah, 13 points, same as James White. Double-digit fantasy points in 5 of his last 6 games. He has 32 receptions on 44 targets and 2 touchdowns in that 6-game span. 25 receptions on 32 targets over his last 4 games. He had 56 yards rushing last week as well. That was his highest total since week 1, but he did fail to score for the first time in a month. Going up against Buffalo this week, they're about middle of the league against fantasy running backs. And the last time they played him, he was injured. It was the last game he missed before returning from injury, so you really can't see anything there. But Bilal Powell, he's been getting it done week in and week out. Like I said, Ryan Fitzpatrick has been getting it done week in and week out. And they pass a ton. Bilal Powell's the guy they use in the passing game, and you do need to pass against Buffalo. They're better at stopping the run, so I think, again, Bilal Powell over Chris Ivory this week.
He did it good for me. He kept me in it. I lost Le'Veon Bell, Shady McCoy, Thomas Rawls, and Charkandrick West, all for parts or all of the season this year at my running back position. So if it wasn't for Bilal Powell, I wouldn't even have been able to compete in this championship game. So luckily, I at least got him out of the waiver claims, although I think Johnny Parlay hacked the system to get Danny Woodhead.
Garbage. Couple more running backs here. Rashad Jennings. I said his name last week as well. He's still available in about 40% of the leagues. He had 74 yards rushing and 62 yards receiving last week at Minnesota. It was his 3rd straight double-digit fantasy performance. He has 52 carries in that span and over 100 total yards in each of those games. This week, versus Philly, led up the 6th most fantasy points to running backs this season. Last time they played, he only had 9 fantasy points and 63 yards rushing, but he has been much more involved recently. Like I said, 52 carries over the last 3 games, and he's been doing it big recently, and I think Philly's going to have trouble stopping this guy this week.
Who was the guy that broke his arm? Justin Forsett for the Ravens, the running back?
Forsett. Well, he went down for the season. I think it was a broken arm, yeah.
Yeah, I always get him and Jennings confused, and I don't know why, because their names aren't even close. But I always think one is the other.
Nope.
I was about to ask you, didn't that guy break his arm right when you first said his name?
You're dead wrong.
Believe it.
Carlos Williams for the Buffalo Bills, available in about 40%
Oh, yeah, now
of
pick
the
him
leagues.
up, huh? Last week you told me he sucked.
What do you mean? I had him in our waiver claims segment last week. I just said some of those other guys I liked a little bit more because Gillislee was involved as well, and he had 9 carries for 93
Giuseppe
yards
did
and a
it big.
touchdown. Yeah, he did it big. Scored for the 3rd straight week. He's available in about 90% of the league, so you could look at him as well. But Carlos Williams this past week did get more carries, 17 carries for 76 yards and a touchdown, 2 receptions for 21 yards, but he did lose a fumble versus Dallas. Now, Dallas, they aren't very good against fantasy running backs this season. This week, they're going up against the New York Jets. They are good against fantasy running backs this season. But the last time they played him, Williams did have 11 fantasy points. So you could see he can get it done against them. But we'll have to see. There's still a chance McCoy plays for some odd reason. That's ridiculous. What? A
You got
torn
nothing to play
MCL he had?
Yeah.
So why? It makes no sense to me. Do you really want to beat the Jets that bad?
Speaking of McCoy, I won our gentlemanly bet of McCoy having the better year than DeMarco.
Yeah.
But you won the bet of Frank Gore
Maybe.
not getting 1,000 because he would have to have a big game.
I think he needs,
Probably like $120 or $130, something
yeah, like
that.
$115.
It's
I think
doable,
it
but
is.
he hasn't even had 100 all year, so I doubt it.
But the whole point of our bet early in the season was, I think DeMarco Murray is going to last longer. That's why I
Well,
think
DeMarco's younger.
You disagreed, though, before. You said LaShawn
Oh, yeah, because
McCoy was going
I
to
just
last
think
longer.
DeMarco's not as good as LaShawn.
See, I think LaShawn's going to be heading down very soon just because he gets hurt so much, man.
He'll be all right.
But yeah, he did have the better season. Obviously, Philly was struggling for a lot of the season offensively.
There's a lot of snow in Buffalo. When he gets hurt, he can just fall down and ice it, get back up.
All right. How about Travaris Cadet for the New Orleans Saints? Available in pretty much every league
I
out there.
salute you.
If you're in a deep league and none of these running backs are out here, this is a very sneaky play. Look, he was claimed by the Saints before this game this week, and he ended up playing over C.J. Spiller on passing downs, obviously. But C.J. Spiller was actually inactive for this game, and Cadet had 5 targets, 3 receptions for 69 yards and a touchdown versus Jacksonville, and now they're going up against Atlanta. Atlanta's not very good against running backs this season, letting up the 4th most fantasy points. And Cadet, he's going to be used in the passing game this week, I'd have to believe, over Spiller again. So it's going to be Tim Hightower in the running game and Cadet in the passing game. So that's a really sneaky play.
Spiller to the Niners or the Browns in the offseason?
He might not even make a team, dude.
I don't know. The Browns would definitely pick him up if they needed him.
I think they have their C.J. Spiller type player, though, and Duke Johnson. That's the thing. And they just drafted him. So I'd go with the 49ers.
Oh, that doesn't mean the Browns wouldn't go out and sign somebody. They're just the worst front office in football.
I don't think they're that stupid, but who knows, man.
Yeah, Kevin Costner, he could make another movie there and bail him out.
How about Pierre Thomas from Washington? He's available in about 99% of the leagues.
I always wanted him to be a Steeler.
He had 4 carries for 22 yards, 7 receptions on 8 targets for 67 yards at Philadelphia last week, ended up with 15 fantasy points. He played ahead of Chris Thompson on passing downs, and that's probably going to remain the same way this week. Washington has been looking to pass more because their run game has really been mediocre this season, and Kirk Cousins has been a beast recently. I think he has 8 touchdowns in his past 2 games.
KC.
No interceptions, so he's playing great at the moment. That could mean more playing time for Thomas just because they want to pass more. And again, going up against Dallas this week, they let up the 5th most fantasy points to running backs. So I'm sure they're going to try to run the ball, but if they can't get it going, Pierre Thomas could have another big game like he did last week.
Where's RG3 going real quick? And is Kirk Cousins going to get a franchise or a long-term deal?
Wow. I don't know, man. Kirk Cousins, do you really trust him for that big deal?
I don't, but I also don't want to franchise him and pay him like $16 million for one season to watch him throw mad picks.
I'd rather pay him $16 million for one season than $12 million for 6 seasons.
You're right about that.
But I don't know what they're going to do with Kirk Cousins. And RG3
to the Saints, maybe? To learn behind Drew Brees?
I don't know. I don't
You think
the
Sean
Saints would do
Payton?
that.
I mean, RG3 was a pretty accurate passer in his first year, and I mean that's kind of what the Saints need. I'm not saying Drew Brees is fast like RG3, but he's not going to be able to run after all these knee injuries and stuff like he used to. So, I mean, he almost fits that same mold. He's kind of small, but he's got an accurate, strong arm, and he knows how to move in the pocket to find a passing lane.
The only thing is, I heard Drew Brees, he wants to play through his age 40 season before he retires. So that's, 4 years away at least?
He's due to get a huge payday this year, so they're going to have to renegotiate his deal.
Please believe. I think he'll take a little bit less money. He wants to win out there, and they're not going to win by paying him more money. I tell you that.
Hell no.
All right, let's get into some wide receivers here.
Wide receivers saved me this year.
Devontae Parker from Miami, available in about 65% of the leagues. He had 10 targets last week, just 4 catches for 93 yards versus Indianapolis. But he has double-digit fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games now, at least 5 targets in each game during that span, and at least 87 yards receiving over his past 2 games. Going up against New England this week, I'm guessing they're going to be passing in this game. New England lets up the 16th most fantasy points to wide receivers. The last time they played, Devontae Parker did not play in that game, but he does have 20 targets over his last 3 home games. So I think he's going to remain involved in this offense. Tannehill, not a very good season for him, unfortunately. But Devontae Parker, he's starting to get involved in with Jarvis Landry and now Devontae Parker on the rise. I think they got some pretty good receivers out there for Tannehill.
I'm not saying Landry's not a bright spot, but we knew he was going to be good. To me, Parker was like the lone bright spot that they had down in Miami. Tannehill had a down year. Philbin got fired. What's their running back? Lamar Miller? Yeah, he's having a rough season. He has one good game and then a garbage game.
Lamar Miller, he's been a beast, but you're right, inconsistent.
Yeah, and they don't use him right either. They'll give him 4 carries in one game, and then they bitch about him not being good. So.
Who has stepped up, though, was Rashard Matthews before he got injured with the rib injury. He was having a great season, and they thought he was their number 5 receiver coming into the season.
Is Ndamukong Suh the biggest disappointment out of the free agent class, considering the amount of money he got?
We sort of knew, kind of, didn't we?
I didn't think he would make them great. Detroit had a great D-line, dude. They had a beast D-line. It wasn't just because of him.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Ruben Randall, said his name last week as well. Available in about 50% of the league still. I think he was my situational starter or sleeper something last week. He did only have 2 catches, but he ended up with 80 yards, I think a 76-yard touchdown at Minnesota. And that was with Odell Beckham Jr. out. So you'd think he'd get more catches in that game, but he didn't. But look, he's still been pretty consistent recently. He scored in 4 of his last 5 games that scored a touchdown. He has double-digit fantasy points in 6 of his last 8 games. At least 5 targets in all but 2 games this season. And now going up against Philadelphia. The last time he played him, 5 catches for 44 yards. But he's been more involved recently as well. Philadelphia, very bad against the pass. I see Ruben Randall, even with Odell Beckham Jr. coming back this week, having a good game.
I don't like corned beef or sauerkraut or rye bread or Swiss cheese or Thousand Island dressing.
Okay.
So I hate Rubens.
Well, you like Philly cheesesteak.
Love them.
So Philly's defense against the Giants this week then, huh?
Oh, hell no. Philly's defense is just about as good as a stale cheesesteak.
All right, how about Keyshawn Martin?
Wasn't that dude a basketball player? Or was that Kenyon Martin? He was beast on the boards.
Yeah. Please believe, for the Nets.
So Keyshawn Martin is Keyshawn Johnson and Kenyon Martin's love child.
You're dead wrong. Keyshawn Martin, New England Patriots, available in about 90% of the leagues. He had 7 receptions last week on 11 targets, 68 yards receiving against the New York Jets with Amendola and Edelman both out. He's had at least 9 fantasy points in each of his last 4 games, and he's expected to play an important role this week at Miami. And I already talked about Miami. Their defense not very good. Lets up the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. Keyshawn Martin should play a big role in this game, even if Amendola or Edelman comes back for this game.
Yeah, because Brandon has really fallen off.
And not to mention, they really don't want to get anybody hurt. So play him, let him get some playing time in this game, and come back for the playoffs. You know what I mean?
Do you believe the conspiracy?
What about
letting the Jets win?
Nah, not necessarily. That's kind of ridiculous. All right, Jermaine Kearse. He's available in
12 sacks this year, right? Oh, wait, wrong guy.
Yeah, that's Javon. But Jermaine, he's available in about 85% of the league still. He's had at least 5 targets in 5 of his last 6 games. Double-digit fantasy points in each of his last 3 games, in 4 of his last 5. They have Arizona this week in Arizona, so it's a tough matchup. And the last time he played Arizona, he only had 1 catch on 2 targets for 10 yards. But again, that was when Seattle's offense wasn't getting it done. Recently,
Blowing up.
Russell Wilson has blown up with all his receivers, and
Screwed
it's been
Doug
all
Baldwin.
with Jimmy Graham out too. That's the surprising thing.
Jimmy
When he
Graham's
went down,
garbage.
they blew up. And since Jimmy Graham went down, Jermaine Kearse has really been the guy to step up and get more targets. So Doug Baldwin, Tyler Lockett, and Jermaine Kearse have all been getting it done. I know Lockett had a down week last week, but Jermaine Kearse didn't actually have a
Still
down
had
week.
double digits.
Oh, he did end up getting into double digits
Yeah,
there?
I'm pretty sure he had like 13 or 14.
All right, so not too bad. So all 3 have been getting it done recently without Jimmy Graham. That's because Russell Wilson has stepped up in a big way. Jermaine Kearse, not a terrible play, even though he has a tough matchup this week.
12 points he had.
12 points.
Not bad.
All right, 2 tight ends. Here's your boy,
Not
man.
Julius Thomas.
No, not Julius Thomas. Zach Ertz.
He's about to put the Ertz on somebody.
He's
First time
available
I heard
in
this
about-
dude's name all year.
Pretty much, man. I think we mentioned him earlier one time this season in a sleeper segment, but
Yeah,
he's
then we
available in
scratched
about 40% of the leagues. He has double-digit fantasy points in each of his last 3 games. Last week, 13 receptions for 122 yards versus Washington. He had 17 targets. And look, he has 30 targets over his last 2 games now. So Sam Bradford is looking Zach Ertz way damn near every frickin' time he drops back. He has at least 78 yards receiving in each of those 3 games as well. Now look, at the New York Giants this week, the Giants can't stop receivers, they can't stop running backs, and they also can't stop tight ends. They led up the 2nd most fantasy points to tight ends this season. And the last time they played, he had 4 receptions for 43 yards, 7 targets. That was way back in week 6 when he wasn't doing anything too. So he still had a pretty decent game for what was going on at that time. Now he's getting targeted a ton, so I see a big game out of Zach Ertz this week.
This is our last waiver claim segment of the year too, huh?
Please
Ertz
believe.
finally makes it on there.
There it is. You could have picked him up before this past game, though, because like I said, he had 13 targets 2 weeks ago, so you could have been quick on it and picked Zach Ertz up for this big game he had. And one last tight end. We said his name for the past 3 weeks now. Zach Miller, still available in about 60% of the
He
leagues.
was a Raider at one point, right?
Please believe. He scored double digits for the 3rd straight week at Tampa Bay last week. 7 catches for 69 yards. At least 5 receptions in each of those games. He has 20 targets in that 3-game span as well. And at least 6 targets in 5 of his last 6 games. Detroit, their defense has been pretty good recently. I know they had a little bit of a letdown last week. But the one thing they haven't been able to do this season is stop the tight end. Letting up the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends. So Zach Miller, he's been consistent since Martellus Bennett went down, and there's no reason not to trust him at this point, even though Jay Cutler is his quarterback.
Jay Cutler.
Jay
I
Cutler.
don't know about that, dude. Miller's a good play. I mean, Chicago, they're just kind of out there chucking it around right now. They got nothing to play for other than respect. NFL players, no professional athletes for that matter, want to lose or like to lose. So, I mean, they're out there giving it their all, and he's probably their number 1 target outside of Alshon Jeffrey, but is he even playing?
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah, so they're going to throw it to that dude a lot. And I just think it's funny, we had the easy and you argument earlier in the year when he dropped Forte right after he got hurt, and then he ends up winning the spread championship. You know that means like more to him than actually winning the championship, right?
Please believe.
Just knowing that he could say,
But no
it doesn't
matter
even
what,
matter that I
dropping
dropped
Matt Forte is never a good choice.
Oh, that's why I scooped him up, dude, just like that. I mean, he helped me win a game, and then I ended up losing in the playoffs, but still I got there. Anything else for the fans?
No.
Well, fans, like I said, this is the last waiver claim episode of the season. I would say June or July we'll start posting some things just into Facebook. We're not going to do segments or anything, but maybe just, top 5 sleepers at that moment of time, or top 5 draft picks that could be potential fantasy, bust or fantasy beasts. Little things like that. So around then, check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/betthespread. Always check out our Twitter page at bet_the_spread and at betjimthewin. Keep coming back to YouTube and click and subscribe. I hope you won your fantasy championship, and I hope you have a happy new year, because I know I'm going to. Making it rain.